The mashed potatoes grew cold on my plate as my sister Sarah's laughter echoed through our parents' dining room. She raised her wine glass like she was making a toast, her voice carrying that familiar, condescending tone. It heard my entire life. "Gloria will never own property," she announced to our Thanksgiving table, gesturing toward me with theatrical flair. Dad nodded approvingly, cutting into his turkey with deliberate precision. "That's right. Stick to renting forever," he added, not even looking up from his plate. My brother Danny shifted uncomfortably while his wife Jessica stared at her cranberry sauce. Mom just smiled, that tight smile she always wore when family tensions surfaced. I set down my fork and met Sarah's triumphant gaze. "You're probably right," I said quietly. The next morning, I drove through Denver's crisp November air with my coffee cooling in the cup holder, mentally reviewing numbers that would have shocked my family into silence. 7 properties, $2.8 million in total value. Monthly rental income of $18,400. Not bad for someone who supposedly would never own property. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the parking lot of Mountain View Estates, the property management company that handled my collections. Marcus Chen, my business partner and the only person who knew my real financial situation, waved from the entrance. We'd met 3 years ago when I was just starting to build my portfolio, and his expertise in property management had been invaluable. "Morning, Gloria," Marcus said as I walked into the office. "Ready to review the monthly reports?" I nodded, settling into the conference room where spreadsheets and property photos covered the table. My empire wasn't flashy, but it was solid. The duplex in Capitol Hill brought in $2,400 monthly. The condo in Lodo generated $2,100. The townhouse in Highlands pulled in $2,800. 3 single-family homes in Aurora and Thornton each contributed between $1,900 and $2,300. And then there was Sarah's house, the crown jewel that she had no idea belonged to me. Sarah's payment came in right on schedule, Marcus mentioned, sliding the report across the table. $3,200, same as always. She's been the most reliable tenant you have. I stared at the address. 2 Maple Street, the charming craftsman bungalow I'd purchased 3 years ago for $420,000, now worth $580,000, according to recent comparable sales. Sarah had been living there for 5 years total, first as a homeowner, then as my unwitting tenant after I'd saved her from foreclosure. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family saw me as the unsuccessful daughter who worked as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm, I was actually building wealth faster than any of them could imagine. The administrative assistant job was real, but it only served as my cover story and provided the W-2 income I needed for mortgage applications. My real work happened in evenings and weekends, analyzing properties, negotiating deals, and managing my growing portfolio. "Remember when Sarah was facing foreclosure?" I asked Marcus, pulling out the original purchase documents. She had no idea who bought her house, just knew some LLC swooped in with a cash offer and immediately offered her a rental agreement. Marcus chuckled. "Denver Properties LLC, your finest creation." She never suspected her own sister was the mystery buyer who saved her credit score. The memory still made my stomach tight. Sarah had called me crying 3 years ago, desperate because she'd fallen 6 months behind on her mortgage after her online boutique business failed. She was 31 then. I was 25, and she couldn't bear the humiliation of moving back in with our parents. When the foreclosure notice arrived, I knew I had to act. I'd been saving every penny from my real job, living in a modest apartment, driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and building my credit score. I had enough cash for a down payment on an investment property, and Sarah's house seemed like a sign from the universe. I could help my sister while making a smart financial move. The purchase went through an LLC to maintain anonymity. Sarah never knew her landlord was her little sister. She just felt grateful that someone was willing to rent her the house she'd nearly lost, and at below market rates. $3,200 monthly was actually a bargain for a 4-bedroom house in her neighborhood, where similar properties rented for $3,600 or more. "Your rental income last month was $18,400, Marcus said, bringing me back to the present. "After expenses and property management fees, you cleared about $14,200, not including the equity you're building." I sipped my coffee, calculating quickly. That was more than most people in my family made in a month from their regular jobs. Dad worked overtime as a postal supervisor to bring home $50 $200 monthly. Mom's part-time bookkeeping added another $1,800. Sarah's various business ventures had never generated consistent income, which explained why she was always stressed about money despite living in a beautiful house. My phone rang. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and raised his eyebrows. Aurora Property. Probably Mrs. Patterson about the leaky faucet. Instead, it was Jake Morrison, the tenant in one of my Aurora single-family rentals. Miss Chen, he said, using the property management company contact name. I'm really sorry, but there's been an incident. My roommate's girlfriend had a party last weekend, and there's some damage to the basement. Looks like someone put a hole in the drywall, and there might be water damage from spilled drinks. I closed my eyes. Property ownership wasn't all passive income and appreciation. These calls were the reality check that kept me grounded. How extensive is the damage, Jake? Honestly, it looks pretty bad. The hole is about the size of a basketball, and the carpet is stained. I think you're going to need professionals. After hanging up, I calculated the repair costs in my head. Drywall repair, carpet replacement, possible subflooring work if the water damage was extensive. Probably $8,000, minimum. That would wipe out several months of profit from that property. Marcus saw my expression. Bad news. Just the reality of being a landlord, I said. Sometimes I wonder if my family has the right idea about renting being simpler. But even as I said it, I knew I didn't mean it. Despite the occasional headaches, property ownership had given me something I'd never had growing up: financial security and independence. While my family worried about rising rent costs and housing market prices, I was building equity and creating multiple income streams. My second phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Thanks for listening to me vent about money stuff lately. You're the best sister ever. The guilt hit me like a physical weight. Sarah had been confiding in me about her financial struggles, never knowing that I was her landlord, benefiting from her monthly rent payments while she worried about affording basic groceries. 2 hours later, I stood in the damaged Aurora property, watching contractors assess what would definitely be an $8,000 repair job. The basement looked like a tornado had hit it, with the basketball-sized hole in the drywall revealing damaged insulation behind it, and dark stains covering nearly half of the beige carpet. Your tenant's been pretty apologetic, said Mike Rodriguez, the contractor I'd worked with before. Says his roommate's girlfriend brought some rough friends to their party. This kind of damage doesn't happen accidentally. I nodded, taking photos for insurance purposes while calculating how this would affect my cash flow. The Aurora property was one of my smaller moneymakers, bringing in only $1,900 monthly. $8,000 in repairs meant over 4 months of lost profit, not counting the time it would take to complete the work and find new tenants if Jake decided to move out. Driving back to the property management office, my phone rang again. This time it was Marcus with unexpected news. I just ran the quarterly financial reports, and I found something interesting about Sarah's payment history, he said. She's never been late. Not once in 3 years. But I decided to run a credit check as part of our annual tenant review process, and she's drowning, Gloria. 40. $7,000 in credit card debt spread across 11 different cards. Her credit score has dropped to 540. She's been making minimum payments on everything, and most of her cards are maxed out. The information hit me harder than the property damage had. Sarah always presented herself as successful, especially at family gatherings. She drove a new Lexus, wore expensive clothes, and constantly talked about her various business ventures. Last Christmas, she'd given everyone lavish gifts while I'd stuck to modest, thoughtful presents that fit my supposed budget as an administrative assistant. There's more, Marcus continued. According to the credit report, she's been using your rental property as her business address for loan applications. Denver Properties LLC is listed as her workplace on 3 different credit applications from the past year. I pulled over in a King Soopers parking lot, needing to process this information. Sarah had been using my property and my LLC as her fake business address to get more credit cards and loans. She was essentially using my success to create a facade of her own success. My phone rang again. This time it was Sarah herself. Gloria, thank God you answered, she said, her voice thick with tears. I need to ask you something, and I'm really embarrassed about it. What's wrong? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. My business has hit a rough patch, and I'm having some cash flow problems. I was wondering if you could lend me $5,000. Just until next month when I'm expecting a big client payment. I stared through my windshield at families loading groceries into their cars. Normal people with normal financial lives who didn't have to navigate the complicated web of secrets Ed created. Sarah, I don't have $5,000 to lend. I'm just an administrative assistant, remember? I know. But I thought maybe you had some savings. I'm really desperate here, Gloria. I can't ask Mom and Dad. They're already worried about retirement. And Danny and Jessica just bought their house. The desperation in her voice was real, but it was complicated by what Marcus had just told me. Sarah was asking me for money while simultaneously using my property as collateral for her own financial schemes. She was renting from me with one hand while potentially damaging my business reputation with the other. I'll see what I can do, I said, buying myself time to think. Let me check my savings account. After hanging up, I called my best friend Amanda, who worked as a real estate agent and was the only person besides Marcus who knew about my property investments. She's using your house as her business address for loan applications. Amanda's voice was incredulous. Gloria, that could get you in serious legal trouble. If she defaults on those loans and they come looking for the business assets, they're going to find your property. I didn't know she was doing it. I said, she probably figured since she lives there, she could list it as her business address. Doesn't matter if you knew. What matters is that your sister is creating potential liability for you while also asking you for money. This is getting messy. Amanda was right, but the situation was even messier than she realized. How could I explain to Sarah that she couldn't use the rental house as her business address without revealing that I owned it? How could I help her financial situation without exposing my own success? And how could I continue taking her rent money while watching her struggle with debt? That evening, I drove past Sarah's house, my house, and saw her Lexus in the driveway. The house looked beautiful in the golden hour light, with the front garden shed planted blooming with late autumn flowers. She'd been a good tenant, taking care of the property like it was her own home, because she still thought of it that way. I remembered the day 3 years ago when Shed called me sobbing about the foreclosure notice. She'd been so ashamed, so terrified of having to tell our parents that her business had failed and she was losing her house. Id felt like a superhero when I arranged the anonymous purchase and rental offer. Id solved her problem while creating an investment opportunity for myself. Now that same arrangement felt like a house of cards about to collapse. Sarah was using my property to get deeper into debt, asking me for money I couldn't give without raising suspicions, and our entire family continued to see me as the unsuccessful sister who would never own property. Walking back to my car, I noticed Sarah's mailbox was overflowing. As her landlord, I technically had a right to check for any business mail that might be using my property address. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 envelopes addressed to Sarah Thompson Enterprises at 42 Maple Street. Business loan applications, credit card offers, and what looked like a notice from a debt collection agency. Sarah wasn't just struggling financially. She was actively making it worse by using my property to support her failing business ventures. And tomorrow was Sunday dinner at our parents' house, where she would probably continue presenting herself as a successful entrepreneur while I sat quietly, pretending to be the family failure. Sunday dinner at my parents' house always followed the same routine. Mom cooked too much food. Dad complained about the weather or politics. Danny tried to keep everyone happy, and Sarah dominated the conversation with stories about her latest business ventures. I usually sat quietly, listening to everyone discuss their lives while keeping my own secrets locked away. This particular Sunday felt different from the moment I walked in. Dad looked tired, more tired than I'd seen him in years. His postal supervisor job had always been physically demanding, but now he seemed worn down in a way that went beyond normal work fatigue. Gloria, honey, Mom said, hugging me at the door. How's work going? Still enjoying the administrative assistant position. It's fine, Mom. Steady paycheck, good benefits. The same answer I'd given for 3 years. Sarah arrived 15 minutes later in her Lexus, wearing a designer jacket I recognized from Nordstrom. She looked polished and confident. Nothing like the desperate woman who'd called me crying about needing $5,000 2 days earlier. Sorry I'm late, everyone, she announced. Kissing Mom's cheek. Client call ran long. Big deal in the works. Danny and Jessica were already seated at the dining room table. Their 1-year-old son, Timothy, playing quietly in his high chair. Danny worked as an accountant for a mid-size firm, and Jessica taught 3rd grade. They were steady, reliable people with a modest income and a new mortgage on a small starter home in Arvada. "Sarah, tell everyone about your new business project," Dad said as we settled around the table. "Robert was just telling me how proud he is of your entrepreneurial spirit." I watched Sarah's face light up as she launched into a detailed description of her latest venture, something involving social media marketing for local restaurants. She spoke confidently about projected revenues, client contracts, and expansion plans. If I hadn't seen her credit report, I might have believed every word. "The restaurant industry is really embracing digital marketing now," Sarah continued, gesturing with her fork. "I'm projecting 6 figures in revenue by next year, already looking at expanding into a bigger office space." Dad beamed with pride. "That's my girl, always thinking big, always growing." "Speaking of growth," Mom chimed in, "we've been making some sacrifices to help Sarah achieve her dreams. Your father picked up extra Saturday shifts at the post office." I looked at Dad more carefully and realized why he seemed so exhausted. He was 50, 8 years old, and working 6 days a week to help fund Sarah's business ventures. "Dad, you don't need to work extra shifts. You should be thinking about slowing down, not speeding up. Gloria, when you have children, you'll understand," he said firmly. "Parents invest in their children's success. Sarah has real potential to build something significant." "What about your retirement savings?" I asked, genuinely concerned. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that made my stomach tighten. "We're managing our finances responsibly," Mom said carefully. "We've made some strategic adjustments to support Sarah's business growth." Danny caught my eye across the table, his expression troubled. After dinner, while Sarah dominated the living room conversation and our parents cleaned dishes, he pulled me aside in the hallway. "I'm worried about Mom and Dad," he whispered. "Last week I saw Dad looking at reverse mortgage paperwork, and Mom's been buying generic everything at the grocery store, even generic coffee. She's never done that before. Reverse mortgage." The words hit me like ice water. "Danny, they can't mortgage this house. It's their only real asset." I tried to bring it up, but Dad got defensive. "Says they're making smart financial investments in Sarah's future. He thinks she's going to be rich and take care of them when they're older." I watched through the living room doorway as Dad listened to Sarah describe her 5-year business plan. His face showed the kind of hope and pride that made my chest ache. He genuinely believed that Sarah was going to be successful enough to secure their retirement. "How much do you think they've given her?" I asked Danny. "I don't know exact numbers, but Jessica heard Mom telling her sister that they've been tightening their belt to help Sarah achieve homeownership." "Homeownership?" I nearly choked. Sarah already lives in a beautiful house. She rents, though. Dad's been talking about how proud he'll be when Sarah buys her own place. Says it's the American dream, building equity instead of just paying rent. The irony was suffocating. Sarah was already living in equity, 3 years of equity that had been building for her. Every month, her $3,200 rent payment was going toward the mortgage on a house that was appreciating in value. She was building homeownership, just not in the way she understood. "I think Dad signed something," Danny continued. "I was helping him set up online banking last month, and I saw a loan payment for $35,000. When I asked about it, he said it was an investment in family success. $35,000. Combined with the extra shifts, the generic groceries, the reverse mortgage research, and Mom's comments about sacrifices, a picture was emerging that made me feel sick. My parents were financing Sarah's lifestyle and business ventures by risking their own retirement security. "Danny, they could lose this house," I said. "If Sarah's business fails, and she can't pay back whatever they signed, the bank could come after Mom and Dad." "I know, but what can we do?" Dad sees Sarah as his success story. Has never been prouder of anything than he is of her business ventures. Back in the living room, Sarah was showing everyone photos on her phone of office spaces she was considering renting. "This one has exposed brick walls and those big industrial windows," she said excitedly. "Perfect for client meetings and Instagram content." Dad nodded approvingly. "You need professional space to attract professional clients. Image matters in business." I wanted to scream. Sarah was drowning in $47,000 of credit card debt, using my property as her business address for fraudulent loan applications, and now planning to rent expensive office space with money my parents were borrowing against their retirement. Meanwhile, I was building actual wealth through real estate investments, while everyone assumed I was the family failure. Gloria, you should take some business classes, Sarah said suddenly, turning the attention to me. Maybe learn some marketable skills beyond basic administrative work. I could mentor you if you're interested in entrepreneurship. Dad nodded enthusiastically. That's a great idea. Sarah could teach you about business planning and financial management. The suggestion was so absurd that I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound that made everyone stare at me. Thanks for the offer, Sarah. I'll definitely consider it. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the image of Dad's tired face and Mom's careful words about strategic financial adjustments. My parents were sacrificing their golden years to fund Sarah's illusions of success, while she was actively making her financial situation worse through poor decisions and potential fraud. But the most frustrating part was that I had the power to fix everything, and no way to use it without destroying my family relationships forever. I could pay off Sarah's debt with a single month's rental income from my properties. I could explain to my parents that they didn't need to sacrifice for Sarah's homeownership dreams because she was already living in a house that was building equity. I could solve everyone's problems with the truth, except the truth would also reveal 3 years of deception. It would show that I'd been letting my family sacrifice for Sarah while profiting from her rent payments. It would expose me as the liar who'd built success while pretending to be unsuccessful. The next morning, my phone rang with a call from Marcus at the property management office. Gloria, I have some interesting news about Sarah's situation. She called yesterday asking about the possibility of purchasing her rental property. Wants to know if the owner would be interested in selling. My heart started pounding. What did you tell her? I followed our standard protocol. Told her I'd contact the owner and see if they'd be interested in discussing a sale. She seemed really excited about the possibility. Did she mention anything about her financing plans? Actually, yes. She said she's been pre-approved for a mortgage and has family support for the down payment. Asked about the property value and whether the owner would consider seller financing options. I sat in my car outside the property management office, trying to process this information. Sarah was planning to buy the house she was renting from me, using money my parents were borrowing against their retirement, not knowing that I was the owner she'd be purchasing from. The web of financial deception had become so complex that there was no way to untangle it without someone getting hurt. And in 48 hours, Sarah expected an answer about whether her mysterious landlord would be willing to sell her the house that I'd bought to save her from foreclosure 3 years ago. Tuesday morning brought the kind of Colorado sunshine that normally made me optimistic about everything. Today, it felt like mockery as I sat in my car outside Mountain View Estates, staring at my phone screen and the email that had arrived 30 minutes earlier. The email was addressed to Sarah Thompson at 42 Maple Street, but it had been sent to my property management account by mistake. Marcus had explained that the systems had similar email addresses and the automated monthly statement had gone to the wrong recipient. But Sarah had received it before the error could be corrected. And now she knew. The statement showed all 7 of my properties, with rental income totals, expense breakdowns, and most importantly, the owner listed as Gloria Patterson on every single line item, including her own address. My phone buzzed with a text message. We need to talk. Today? Sarah, I called Marcus immediately. How bad is this? She called the office 20 minutes ago, pretending to be you. Used your full name, knew details about the properties that she shouldn't know. My assistant almost gave her complete access to your account before I intervened. What did you tell her? That there was a security protocol for account access, and we needed to verify identity in person. But Gloria, she knows everything now. Property addresses, income amounts, even the LLC structures. She's been researching your investments. I closed my eyes and tried to think clearly. Sarah had discovered that her administrative assistant's sister owned 7 properties worth nearly $3 million, generated more monthly income than our father's annual salary, and had been her anonymous landlord for 3 years. She knew I'd been secretly building wealth while watching our parents sacrifice their retirement to support her business ventures. The question was what she planned to do with that information. Over the next 6 hours, I received a series of increasingly pointed text messages from Sarah. Interesting morning reading. Administrative assistant is quite a cover story. No wonder you couldn't lend me $5,000. Busy managing your real estate empire. Amazing what people can discover with the right information. Each message felt like a screw tightening in my chest. Sarah was playing with me. letting me know she held all the cards while keeping her actual intentions hidden. At 3 p.m., she sent the message I'd been dreading. Coffee tomorrow? Cherry Creek Mall. We need to discuss our business relationship. That evening, I called Amanda and explained the situation. Her response was immediate and alarmed. Gloria, this is really bad. Sarah has been using your property for fraudulent loan applications. She's drowning in debt, and now she knows you're her landlord. She could create serious legal problems for you. What kind of problems? If she's listed your property as her business address on loan documents, and those loans go into default, creditors could come after the property itself. Plus, if she decides to get vindictive, she could claim you've been engaging in predatory lending or taking advantage of her financial distress. But I helped her. I saved her from foreclosure. You also didn't disclose that you were her landlord, which could be seen as deceptive. And you've been collecting rent from family member while that family member was struggling financially. A good lawyer could make that look really bad. I spent the night researching landlord, tenant laws, and family financial disclosure requirements. The more I read, the more I realized that Sarah held significant power over me now. She could potentially void her rental agreement by claiming I'd failed to disclose material information about our family relationship. She could demand rent refunds. She could even claim emotional distress from discovering that her own sister had been profiting from her housing insecurity. But there was something else bothering me. Something Amanda had mentioned during our call. What did you mean when you said she could get vindictive? Think about it from Sarah's perspective, Amanda had replied. She's been the golden child her whole life, always seen as the successful sister. Now she discovers that you've been quietly building wealth while everyone thinks you're unsuccessful. That's got to be humiliating. Wednesday morning, I arrived at the Cherry Creek Mall coffee shop 30 minutes early, hoping to claim a corner table where we could have privacy. Sarah walked in precisely on time, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, carrying a leather portfolio that looked expensive and official. She didn't smile when she saw me. Instead, she sat down across from me, with the careful deliberation of someone who had planned this conversation extensively. So, she said, opening her portfolio and pulling out printed copies of my property management statements. Administrative assistant. That's quite a career pivot from real estate mogul. Sarah, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can. 3 years of explanations, I'd imagine. 3 years of sitting at family dinners while mom and dad worried about money, while they picked up extra shifts and ate generic food to help me achieve homeownership dreams. She spread the papers across the table like evidence in a trial. 3 years of collecting $840 monthly from all your properties, including $200 from me. $200. I corrected automatically. I gave you below market rent. How generous. A family discount while you built equity in my home. The word my hit me like a slap. Sarah still thought of the house as hers, even knowing I owned it. Sarah, you were facing foreclosure. I saved your credit score and let you stay in the house you loved, without telling me you were my landlord, without letting me know that my own sister was profiting from my housing situation. Do you realize how that makes me feel? I could see genuine hurt in her eyes, and it made my chest tighten. I wanted to help without changing our family dynamics. If everyone knew I owned properties, it would have shifted everything. It would have shifted everything because you've been lying to us for 3 years. Her voice rose slightly, and she glanced around to make sure other customers weren't staring. Mom and Dad have been sacrificing their retirement to support my business ventures, thinking I need help achieving financial stability. Meanwhile, their other daughter is secretly wealthier than all of us combined. Sarah, I didn't know about Mom and Dad's sacrifices. Didn't you? Or did you just choose not to ask questions when they started looking tired and talking about tightening their belts? She was right, and the admission felt like swallowing glass. I had noticed Dad's exhaustion and Mom's generic grocery purchases. I had chosen not to dig deeper because I was afraid of what I might discover. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued, her voice becoming businesslike and cold. You're going to transfer the deed to 2 Maple Street to me for $1. A gift between sisters to correct this 3-year mistake. Sarah, that house is worth $580,000. I know exactly what it's worth. I've been researching property values extensively since yesterday. The house has appreciated by $160,000 since you bought it. Equity that should have been mine if you hadn't intervened in my foreclosure process. If I hadn't intervened, You would have lost everything. If you had been honest, I could have made informed decisions about my housing situation. Instead, you manipulated the situation for your own financial benefit. I stared at the papers spread across the table, trying to find a response that made sense. And if I don't agree to transfer the deed, then our family learns some very interesting information about your secret business ventures. Mom and Dad discover that they've been sacrificing their retirement to help me buy a house while you were already profiting from my rent payments. Danny and Jessica find out that you've been building wealth while pretending to struggle financially. That's blackmail. That's consequences. You created this situation with 3 years of deception. I'm offering you a way to fix it. You want me to give you a $580,000 house for free. I want you to give me the house you should never have bought without my knowledge in the first place. The house where I've been paying your mortgage and building your equity while thinking I was just covering my rent. Sarah closed her portfolio and stood up. You have 48 hours to decide. Either transfer the deed, or I call a family meeting and share these property management statements with everyone. Let them decide whether your 3 years of helping was actually manipulation and financial exploitation. As she walked away, I realized that my secret empire had become a prison. All the wealth it built meant nothing if it destroyed my family relationships. But giving in to Sarah's blackmail meant rewarding her financial irresponsibility while sacrificing my own hard-earned assets. I had 48 hours to choose between financial ruin and family destruction. And either choice would change everything forever. Thursday evening, I met Amanda at a restaurant in downtown Denver, far enough from my usual neighborhoods that I could think clearly. Shed brought along her husband Jake, who happened to be a lawyer specializing in real estate disputes. Blackmail is actually a crime, Jake said after it explained Sarah's ultimatum. But proving it would require evidence that she's threatening to expose information specifically to extort money or property from you. Isn't that exactly what she's doing? Yes, but family financial disputes get complicated legally. A prosecutor would be reluctant to file charges between sisters, especially when Sarah could argue that she's just demanding fairness after discovering deceptive business practices. Amanda leaned forward. What if Gloria just explains the situation to her parents? Beats Sarah to the punch. That might be the smartest move, Jake agreed. Control the narrative instead of letting Sarah frame it as exploitation. But I wasn't ready to give up without understanding Sarah's real plan. That night, I called my friend Marcus and asked him to run a detailed background check on Sarah's recent financial activity. What he found was worse than it imagined. She's not just planning to demand the house deed, Marcus said over the phone Friday morning. I found evidence that she's already been shopping for real estate agents. 3 different agents have been contacted about a quick sale of inherited property in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. Inherited property gets better. She's also been researching cash, out refinancing options, and bridge loans. Gloria, I think Sarah's planning to get the house deed from you and immediately sell it for cash. But what about her housing situation? Where would she live? Based on her credit report, she's already behind on her car payment and facing serious debt collection issues. My guess is she needs a large cash infusion to avoid bankruptcy, and she sees your house as her lottery ticket. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Sarah wasn't interested in homeownership or building equity. She wanted to convert my property into immediate cash to solve her debt crisis. She would take the house I'd bought to save her from financial ruin, sell it immediately, and leave our parents responsible for the $35,000 loan they'd co-signed for her business ventures. There's something else, Marcus continued. I did some checking on the loan our parents co-signed. It's not just a business loan. Sarah used the money to pay down credit card debt, but she also used some of it as a down payment on that Lexus she drives. If she defaults, the bank can come after both the car and your parents' house. I felt like I was falling down a deep hole with no bottom. Sarah's financial situation was even worse than I'd realized, and my parents were far more exposed than they understood. Dad was working extra shifts to help fund Sarah's lifestyle while unknowingly risking their home. Mom was buying generic groceries to save money for Sarah's future, while their own retirement security crumbled. And Sarah's solution was to take my house, sell it for cash, and let our parents deal with the consequences of her other debts. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Sarah, calling right on her 48-hour deadline. Have you made your decision? She asked without preamble. I need to understand something first. What's your plan after I transfer the deed? That's not your concern. You'll have corrected your 3-year mistake, and I'll have the homeownership that should have been mine all along. Sarah, are you planning to sell the house? There was a pause. I might explore my options. Real estate is an investment, after all. You should understand that better than anyone. And where would you live? Again, not your concern. Maybe I'll downsize to something more affordable. Maybe I'll use the equity to expand my business. The point is, it would be my choice to make. I closed my eyes and made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm not transferring the deed. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not giving you the house. Then you've chosen family destruction over family harmony. I'll be calling Mom and Dad tonight to share some interesting financial documents. Sarah, wait. Before you make that call, there's something you need to know about your other financial obligations. What do you mean? I know about the $47,000 in credit card debt. I know about the $35,000 loan Mom and Dad co-signed. I know you've been using my property as your business address for fraudulent credit applications. Another pause. Longer this time. You've been investigating me. I've been trying to understand why my sister would blackmail me for a house worth nearly $600,000. And what I found is that you're not planning homeownership, Sarah. You're planning bankruptcy avoidance. You don't know anything about my situation. I know that selling my house would solve your immediate debt crisis while leaving Mom and Dad responsible for a loan they can't afford to repay. I know that you've been lying to our family about your business success while they sacrifice their retirement to support your ventures. And I know that taking my property wouldn't fix your fundamental financial problems. Gloria, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. For the first time in our conversation, Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I could hear the desperation she'd been hiding behind anger and demands. Then explain it to me, I said softly. Help me understand what's really happening. I'm drowning, she said finally. The business failed 6 months ago, but I couldn't tell everyone. Dad was so proud. Mom kept talking about my success. I kept using credit cards to maintain appearances, thinking I could turn things around. And the loan from Mom and Dad, I told them it was for business expansion, but I used most of it to pay minimums on my credit cards. The Lexus was supposed to be for client meetings, but really I just needed something reliable because my old car died. I sat in my car outside the property management office, listening to my sister admit to financial fraud while our parents worked overtime to support her illusions of success. Sarah, selling my house won't solve this. You'll have cash temporarily, but you'll still have no income, no business plan, and no place to live. Plus, Mom and Dad will still be responsible for a loan they can't afford. It would buy me time to figure things out, or it would enable you to avoid responsibility while shifting the consequences to our parents, says the sister who's been secretly profiting from my housing situation for 3 years. We were back to the circular argument that had started this whole confrontation. Sarah saw my property ownership as exploitation, while I saw it as the solution that had saved her from foreclosure. Neither of us was completely right, and neither of us was completely wrong. But the 48-hour deadline was up, and I'd made my choice. I'm not transferring the deed, Sarah, but I am going to help you find a real solution to your financial problems. By doing what? By telling our family the truth. All of it. Your debt, my properties, Mom and Dad's loan exposure, everything. Then we'll work together to fix this mess instead of just shifting it around. Gloria, if you expose my financial situation, it will destroy me. And if you expose my property ownership without context, it will destroy me. But maybe we're both looking at this wrong. Maybe destruction is what we need before we can rebuild something honest. After hanging up, I sat in the parking lot for another hour, preparing for the phone calls I needed to make. First to my parents, requesting a family meeting for Sunday afternoon. Then to Danny, asking him to bring Jessica and baby Timothy. Then to Amanda, asking her to be available in case I needed emotional support. By Sunday, my family would know everything. Sarah's debt, my wealth, our parents' financial exposure, 3 years of secrets and lies and misguided attempts to help each other. The conversation would be brutal, but it was time for honesty. I just hoped that on the other side of that honesty, there would still be a family worth saving. Saturday morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes from having nothing left to lose. It made my decision to tell my family everything. But before that conversation happened, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I called Amanda first, asking her to use her real estate connections to verify something that had been bothering me about Sarah's timeline. I need you to check if anyone has contacted listing agents about 42 Maple Street recently, I told her. Sarah mentioned exploring her options, but I want to know how serious those explorations have been. Amanda called back an hour later with information that made my stomach drop. Gloria, it's worse than you thought. Sarah didn't just contact agents about selling the property. She's already signed a listing agreement. What do you mean? I talked to 3 different agents. One of them, Rebecca Martinez at Denver Premier Properties, said a woman named Sarah Thompson came in Thursday morning, claiming she was about to inherit property and wanted to prepare for a quick sale. Rebecca said Sarah seemed very knowledgeable about the property value and extremely motivated to sell fast. But she doesn't own the property yet. That's the scary part. Rebecca said Sarah told her the ownership transfer would happen within a few days, and she wanted everything ready for immediate listing. She even discussed pricing strategy for a sale that needs to close within 30 days. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. Sarah hadn't just been threatening to blackmail me for the property deed. She'd been actively preparing to flip my house for cash the moment she got control of it. There's more, Amanda continued. Rebecca mentioned that Sarah asked specific questions about selling property to cover debt obligations. Apparently, Sarah told her that the inherited property would solve some family financial challenges, and she needed to maximize the cash from the sale. After hanging up with Amanda, I called Marcus at the property management office with an unusual request. I need you to officially terminate Sarah's rental agreement and deliver an eviction notice, I said. Gloria, are you sure? That's going to create a huge family crisis. The family crisis already exists. I just haven't acknowledged it yet. But I can't let Sarah continue living in my property while planning to steal it from me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You realize this means she'll know that you're fighting back. No more passive acceptance of her demands. Good. It's time she understood that I'm not going to be manipulated into giving away $600,000 of real estate because she made poor financial decisions. 2 hours later, Marcus called to confirm that the official notice had been delivered. I used our standard property sale termination letter, informed Sarah Thompson that the property at 42 Maple Street has been sold to new owners, and her tenancy will be terminated in 30 days to allow for owner occupancy. What was her reaction? Let me put it this way. She called the office 6 times in 20 minutes, demanding contact information for the new owners and threatening legal action if the sale wasn't legitimate. That afternoon, my phone started ringing constantly. Sarah's calls became increasingly frantic as she realized her carefully planned property grab was falling apart. Gloria, something terrible has happened, she said when I finally answered. Some investor bought my house out from under me. They're evicting me with only 30 days' notice. That's awful. Sarah, do you have anywhere else to go? This isn't a joke. I was about to buy this house. I had everything arranged. Now some stranger is kicking me out and I don't have anywhere to live. What about your business income? Can't you afford to rent somewhere else? You know my business is struggling right now. Gloria, I need your help. Can I stay with you for a few weeks while I figure out my housing situation? The irony was breathtaking. Sarah was asking to move in with me after trying to blackmail me out of $600,000 in property. She had no idea that her new landlord and her sister were the same person. I don't really have space for a long-term house guest, I said carefully. It wouldn't be long-term, just until I can find something affordable. Maybe get back on my feet financially. What about the money from Mom and Dad? Can't you use that for a security deposit somewhere? That money is tied up in business investments. Another lie. The money was tied up in credit card debt payments and car loans. That evening, I drove past my property on Maple Street and saw Sarah's Lexus in the driveway, along with a moving truck. She was already packing, assuming she'd be able to stay with family members while she figured out her next move. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the afternoon researching her other options. The $35,000 loan from our parents was coming due in 6 months, with a balloon payment that would require either refinancing or full repayment. Sarah's credit score made refinancing impossible, which meant she'd either have to find another source of cash or our parents would be responsible for the full amount. Additionally, her credit card minimum payments totaled nearly $1,800 monthly, more than most rental properties in her price range would cost. Even if she found affordable housing, she couldn't afford to live anywhere while carrying that debt load. Sunday morning arrived with a text message from Sarah. Family meeting today. I have important information to share with everyone about property ownership and financial disclosure. She was following through on her threat to expose my real estate investments, but she didn't know that I'd already called my parents and scheduled my own family meeting for the same afternoon. Actually, I texted back, I think we should have that conversation. I have some important financial information to share with the family, too. What kind of information? Information about debt obligations, loan signers, and the real financial situation everyone in our family is dealing with. Should be an interesting afternoon. For the first time since this whole crisis began, I felt like I was controlling the narrative instead of reacting to Sarah's manipulations. She wanted to expose my property ownership as family betrayal? Fine. I would expose her debt crisis as family fraud. She wanted to shame me for building wealth secretly? I would reveal how that wealth could actually solve the financial problems Shed created for our parents. The truth was going to hurt everyone. But lies were destroying everyone. At least the truth offered a foundation for rebuilding something honest and sustainable. As I drove toward my parents' house for what would be the most difficult conversation of my life, I realized that I'd learned something valuable from this crisis. Secrets weren't protection. They were poison that slowly destroyed relationships from the inside. Today, the poison would come out. And then, maybe, healing could begin. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a leather folder that contained 3 years of property management statements, loan documents I'd obtained through public records, and Sarah's credit report that Marcus had legally acquired through our tenant screening process. Sarah's Lexus was already in the driveway, parked next to Dad's pickup truck and Danny's Honda. Through the living room window, I could see everyone gathered around the coffee table, probably listening to Sarah's version of recent events. Mom answered the door with a concerned expression that made my chest tight. Gloria, honey, Sarah's been telling us about some problem with her landlord. She might need to move in with one of us temporarily. I know, Mom. That's actually part of what I need to discuss with everyone. In the living room, Sarah sat in Dad's favorite armchair, wearing a conservative blouse and minimal makeup that made her look vulnerable and wronged. Danny and Jessica sat on the couch with baby Timothy, sleeping in Jessica's arms. Dad stood by the window, his postal worker uniform suggesting he'd come straight from his Saturday shift. Gloria, Sarah said as I entered, I'm so glad you're here. I was just telling everyone about this housing crisis I'm facing, and I think we should discuss family support options. Before we do that, I said, settling onto the couch next to Danny, I think there are some financial realities our family needs to understand. I placed my folder on the coffee table, next to Sarah's own stack of papers. Sarah, go ahead and share whatever information you brought. I'd like everyone to hear your perspective first. Sarah's confident expression flickered slightly, as if Shed expected me to be defensive rather than cooperative. Well, I've discovered some concerning information about property ownership and family financial dynamics that I think everyone should know about. What kind of information? Dad asked. Sarah opened her folder and pulled out the property management statements that had been accidentally emailed to her. It turns out that Gloria has been hiding significant real estate investments from all of us. 7 properties worth nearly $3 million, generating over $18,000 in monthly rental income. Mom gasped. Danny's eyebrows shot up. Dad turned from the window to stare at me directly. Is that true, Gloria? Mom asked quietly. Yes, it's true. I own 7 rental properties, including the house that Sarah has been renting for the past 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad slowly sat down in Mom's usual chair, his face cycling through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been hurt. You've been Sarah's landlord? Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I bought Sarah's house 3 years ago when she was facing foreclosure. I purchased it through an LLC and offered it back to her as a rental property so she could stay in the home she loved, without telling her you were her landlord, Sarah added quickly. Without telling any of us that you had the financial means to help with family problems. Dad found his voice. Gloria, we've been working extra shifts and cutting expenses to help Sarah with her business ventures. If you had this kind of income, why didn't you offer to help? The question hung in the air like an accusation. This was the moment I'd been dreading, but it was also the moment when complete honesty became possible. Because Sarah's business ventures aren't the real problem, I said, opening my own folder, and my property income isn't the real solution. I pulled out Sarah's credit report and placed it on the coffee table. Sarah, tell them about the $47,000 in credit card debt. Sarah's face went pale. Gloria, that's private financial information. Tell them about using my rental property as your business address for fraudulent loan applications. That's not fraud. I live there. Tell them about your plan to demand that I transfer the house deed to you for $1, then immediately sell the property for cash to pay off your debts. The room erupted in voices. Dad demanding explanations, Mom asking questions, Danny trying to understand the timeline, Sarah protesting that I was twisting her words. Enough, I said loudly, and everyone went quiet. Baby Timothy stirred in Jessica's arms but didn't wake up. Here is what's really happening in our family, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. 3 years ago, Sarah was facing foreclosure due to business failure and debt accumulation. I had been building a real estate portfolio through careful saving and investment. When Sarah's house was about to be lost, I bought it anonymously and offered her a rental agreement at below market rates. I looked directly at Dad. I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to help without changing family dynamics. I didn't want to be seen as the successful sister while Sarah was struggling. But that's exactly what you were, Sarah interjected. The successful sister, hiding your success while watching us worry about money. You're right, I admitted. I was successful, and I was hiding it. But I was also helping. Sarah, your rent payments have been going toward the mortgage on a house that's now worth $580,000. You've been building equity, just not in the way you understood. I pulled out another document. Mom, Dad, tell everyone about the $35,000 loan you signed for Sarah's business. Dad's face went red. How do you know about that? Because when Sarah threatened to expose my property ownership, I researched everyone's financial situation to understand what we're really dealing with. I spread the loan documents across the table. This loan is coming due in 6 months with a balloon payment. Based on Sarah's credit score, she won't be able to refinance, which means you'll be responsible for the full $35,000. Mom's hand went to her throat. Robert, you told me that loan was guaranteed by Sarah's business assets. I thought it was, Dad said weakly. Sarah used the loan money to pay down credit card debt and buy a car. I continued. Her business has been failing for months, but she's been maintaining appearances with borrowed money while you've been working extra shifts to support her fictional success. Sarah stood up abruptly. Gloria, you're making this sound much worse than it is. Am I? Your monthly credit card minimums are $1,800. Your car payment is $450. You have no business income and no prospects for employment that would cover your basic living expenses, much less your debt obligations. I turned to address my parents directly. You've been sacrificing your retirement security to help Sarah achieve homeownership, not knowing that she's already been living in equity, building homeownership for 3 years, and not knowing that she was planning to sell that property immediately after gaining ownership, leaving you responsible for debt she cannot repay. The room was silent except for the ticking of Mom's grandfather clock and Timothy's soft breathing. Danny was the first to speak. So, let me understand this correctly. Gloria secretly bought Sarah's house to save her from foreclosure, then rented it back to her at below market rates while building equity. Meanwhile, Sarah accumulated more debt and convinced Mom and Dad to co-sign loans that she used for non-business purposes. And now Sarah wanted Gloria to give her the house so she could sell it for cash. That's a very simplified version, Sarah said defensively. But it's accurate, Dad said slowly, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Sarah, is it true that you used our loan for credit card payments instead of business investments? Sarah's composure finally cracked. She sat back down heavily and put her face in her hands. I was drowning. The business failed, but I couldn't tell you. You were so proud, so supportive. I thought I could turn things around if I just had time. Time purchased with our retirement savings, Mom said quietly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought Gloria's property empire was some kind of cosmic joke, the unsuccessful sister secretly wealthy while I was failing at everything. It seemed like the universe owed me something. I moved from the couch to kneel beside Sarah's chair. The universe doesn't owe you anything, Sarah. But I do. She looked up at me with red, rimmed eyes. What do you mean? I mean, I should have been honest 3 years ago. I should have told you I was buying your house instead of hiding behind anonymous LLCs. I should have offered to help with your debt instead of letting you struggle while I profited from your rent payments. I stood up and addressed everyone in the room. Here's what I propose. Sarah, I'll forgive your remaining rent obligations and give you 60 days to find new housing. I'll also pay off your credit card debt in full. $47,000. Sarah's mouth fell open. Gloria, you don't have to, I'm not finished. In exchange, you'll enter a debt management program and find stable employment within 90 days. The house stays in my name, but you can continue living there month to month while you get back on your feet, with the understanding that it's a temporary arrangement. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, I'll pay off the $35,000 loan you signed, and I'll cover the cost of any other financial obligations you've taken on to support Sarah's business ventures. Dad's eyes filled with tears. Gloria, we can't accept that kind of money from you. It's not charity. It's investment in our family's financial stability. You've been sacrificing your retirement to help Sarah, not knowing that your other daughter had the resources to help instead. What do you want in return? Mom asked. Honesty. No more secrets about money, business ventures, property ownership, or financial struggles. We make decisions together, with complete information. From now on, I looked around the room at my family, seeing them clearly for the first time in years. Dad, exhausted from working extra shifts to support dreams that were actually debts. Mom, quietly worried about their retirement security while buying generic groceries to save money for Sarah's future. Danny and Jessica, young parents trying to navigate their own financial challenges while watching their extended family struggle with money issues. Sarah, drowning in debt and shame, trapped by the gap between her public image and private reality. And me, secretly wealthy but emotionally isolated, hiding success instead of sharing it, profiting from family relationships while pretending to struggle alongside them. There's one more thing, I said. Sarah, if you want to eventually buy the house at Maple Street, I'll sell it to you at cost plus improvements. $420,000, the price I paid plus the money I've invested in upgrades. You'll have 3 years to save for a down payment and establish steady income. If you can qualify for a mortgage by then, the house is yours. Sarah started crying. Not the manipulative tears shed used earlier in the week, but genuine sobs of relief and shame. Gloria, I've been horrible to you. I tried to blackmail you for a house worth $600,000. And I've been horrible to you by letting you struggle with debt while I secretly had the means to help. We've both made mistakes. Dad stood up and walked over to where I was standing. For a moment, I thought he might be angry with me for the 3 years of deception. Instead, he pulled me into a hug that smelled like aftershave and postal sorting facility. I'm proud of you, he whispered, not just for the financial success, but for how you're handling this crisis. You're taking care of your family. Mom joined the hug, then Danny and Jessica with baby Timothy, and finally Sarah, who was still crying but looked lighter than she had in months. I have one question, Jessica said as we all settled back into our seats. How did you build a real estate empire while working as an administrative assistant? For the next hour, I explained my investment strategy, the LLC structures, the property management systems, and the financial planning that had allowed me to accumulate 7 properties by age 28. Dad asked detailed questions about rental income calculations. Mom wanted to understand property tax implications. Danny was fascinated by the mortgage leverage strategies. Sarah listened quietly, occasionally asking about specific properties or neighborhoods. Gradually, her questions shifted from defensive to genuinely curious. Could you teach me about real estate investment? She asked finally. Not as a get-rich-quick scheme, but as a long-term wealth-building strategy. I'd be happy to, I said. But first, you need stable income and manageable debt levels. Real estate investing requires patience and financial discipline. I know I haven't shown much financial discipline lately. Lately, Danny laughed. Sarah, you've been financially chaotic since high school. Thanks for the support, Danny. I'm serious, though, Danny continued. This might be the best thing that could have happened to our family. Finally talking about money honestly, instead of pretending everyone's doing fine while secretly struggling. As the afternoon moved into evening, we developed a specific plan for moving forward. Sarah would spend the next week researching debt management programs and employment opportunities. Dad would reduce his schedule to normal hours, and Mom would stop sacrificing household comforts for Sarah's fictional business needs. I would work with my accountant to structure the debt payoffs in the most tax-efficient way possible. Most importantly, we would have monthly family financial meetings where everyone shared updates about their economic situation, investment opportunities, and any challenges they were facing. No more secrets, Dad said, echoing my earlier words. If someone needs help, they ask. If someone has resources to help, they offer. We're family. We should be supporting each other instead of hiding from each other. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the question that had started this entire crisis: whether I would ever own property. The irony was that I'd been building property ownership for years, while everyone assumed I'd never achieve it. But real ownership wasn't just about having my name on deed documents. It was about taking responsibility for the impact my financial choices had on the people I loved. 3 years ago, I'd bought Sarah's house thinking I was helping her while protecting myself. What I'd actually done was create a web of secrecy that isolated me from my family and enabled Sarah's financial self-destruction. True ownership meant owning both the benefits and the consequences of my choices. Now, for the first time since I'd started investing in real estate, my family knew who I really was. Not the unsuccessful administrative assistant, not the secretly wealthy landlord, but Gloria Patterson, a woman who'd built something valuable and was learning to use it responsibly. Sarah texted me later that night. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was trying to steal from you." I texted back. "Thank you for forcing me to stop hiding. I'd rather be honestly complicated than secretly simple." The next morning, I called Marcus to discuss modifying my property management approach. Instead of hiding behind LLC anonymity, I wanted to be directly involved with tenant relationships and community building. Real estate wasn't just about accumulating assets. It was about creating homes where families could thrive. By the end of the week, Sarah had enrolled in a debt management program and accepted a customer service position at a local bank. The job didn't pay much, but it provided steady income and benefits while she worked on rebuilding her financial foundation. Dad returned to his normal work schedule and started asking me about retirement investment strategies. Mom began cooking her normal meals again, no longer trying to save money for Sarah's fictional business expansion. Danny and Jessica started discussing their own homeownership timeline, and I offered to help them understand mortgage options and neighborhood pricing when they were ready to move beyond their starter home. 6 months later, Sarah moved into a modest apartment and began making her own rent payments for the first time in 3 years. She was debt-free, employed, and slowly rebuilding her credit score. The Lexus had been sold and replaced with a reliable used Honda. Our monthly family financial meetings became something we all looked forward to. Honest conversations about money that brought us closer together instead of driving us apart. And the house at 42 Maple Street? I kept it as a rental property, but I removed it from my portfolio of anonymous LLC holdings. Instead, it became the Gloria Patterson Family Housing Initiative, a property I would eventually offer to family members who needed stable housing while building their own financial foundation. Because I'd learned that true property ownership isn't about accumulating assets in secret. It's about building something valuable and sharing it with the people who matter most. Sarah had been wrong when she said I'd never own property, but she'd been right about something more important. Property ownership without family connection is just expensive loneliness. Now I had both wealth and family, honesty and success, property ownership, and people worth sharing it with. And that felt like the real American dream. What family financial secrets have you been keeping? And how might honesty transform your relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it made you think differently about money and family dynamics. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength through honesty. And share this with anyone who might need a reminder that our greatest wealth comes from authentic relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to build something valuable and share it with the people you love.